My name is Eleanor Brooks, and I'm 66 years old. I used to believe I understood what loss meant, until this morning. Inside a small wooden church in a quiet town in southern Tennessee, where the air smelled of lilies and old hymn books, and the organ played slow, mournful notes, I stood and watched as the casket holding the man I'd spent nearly 40 years beside, my husband, Harold Brooks, was wheeled toward the crematorium chamber. Just as the pastor lowered his head to pray, the phone inside my purse buzzed. I wasn't going to check it. I thought it was just another condolence message, someone who didn't know the service was still going on. But for some reason, my hand moved on its own. I pulled out the phone and looked at the screen. One message, from Harold's number. I'm still alive. Don't trust anyone. My body froze. I couldn't breathe. Every sound in the church faded like I was behind glass. I stared at the message until my vision blurred. I turned the screen off, took a breath, turned it on again. The message was still there. Same words, same number, same time. I looked up. At the front row, my eldest son Daniel was straightening his tie, calm, composed, almost cold. Next to him, my second son Ben stood with his head bowed, looking sad, but not a single tear on his face. Daniel didn't look like a grieving son. He looked like a man managing an event, and he was the one who insisted on cremation immediately. Dad wouldn't want to trouble anyone, he said. I stared at them, then at the casket. My hand trembled as I stepped forward to lay my palm on the wood. My final goodbye. But all I could think was, if Harold is alive, then who is in this coffin? The service ended the way most small-town funerals do. Quiet hymns, murmured condolences, and then people leaving just as quickly as they came. Daniel and Ben stood near the exit, speaking softly and politely to guests, as if they were wrapping up a business meeting, not their father's goodbye. They had no idea I had just received a message from the man we were burying. As the crowd thinned, Daniel placed the urn in my hands. His voice was steady, too steady. Get some rest, Mom. It's done now. No hug, no hand squeeze, just words, cold and final. I brought the urn home. The house where Harold and I lived for more than 30 years. Wedding photos, the boy's handprints on the kitchen wall. His rocking chair, still facing the window, now felt unbearably silent. I set the urn in the middle of the dining table, the same table where we had dinner every night. I stared at it for a long time. Something inside me felt wrong, like the whole room was holding its breath. I opened the message again. I'm still alive. Don't trust anyone. I tried calling him. It rang and rang. No answer. That somehow terrified me more than if the number had been disconnected. Who could send this? From Harold's phone? At this exact moment, during his funeral, it was nearly midnight. I couldn't sit still. With shaking hands, I unlocked the urn. It took me nearly a full minute to twist the latch. The lid opened with a dry click. And inside wasn't ash. It was pale, fine, like sand mixed with wood dust, no trace of bone, no smell of human remains. My knees gave out. I dropped into the chair. The whispers I'd heard around town, stories about switched bodies, fake funerals, people disappearing suddenly, didn't sound crazy anymore. This wasn't Harold. He wasn't in this urn. For the first time since the funeral, I cried. Not from grief, but from fear. If Harold is alive, where is he? If his ashes are fake, who switched them? And worst of all, why were Daniel and Ben so desperate to cremate their father so quickly? I placed my hand on the cold urn and whispered, barely breathing. Harold, if you're still out there, tell me the truth. No answer. Just moonlight spilling across the table, shining over an urn that held no ashes, only secrets. And in that exact moment, I understood. This isn't the story of a widow mourning her husband. This is the beginning of a hunt for the truth. I woke up after a night of barely sleeping. Dawn hadn't fully broken yet, but thin mist covered the front lawn like a cold sheet no one asked for. The urn was still sitting on the kitchen table, right where I left it last night, like an open wound I couldn't bear to touch, but couldn't ignore either. I poured myself a cup of black coffee, but when I lifted it to my lips, I realized my hands were still shaking. At this point, I'm not certain of anything, except one thing. Harold is not inside that urn. I began replaying every detail I had overlooked before. Harold's death happened too smoothly, too perfectly arranged. Less than 24 hours after the explosion at his workshop, Daniel already had the death certificate, was speaking to the funeral home, and had signed cremation paperwork. I never even got to see Harold's body. They said it was for my own good, that the burns were too severe. Back then, I believed them. Now I see just how foolish that was. I pulled out the medical report and death certificate papers Daniel told me to sign the night before the funeral. I never looked closely. They said it was just protocol. But the time of death listed was 6:40 p.m. The phone call telling me about the accident came at 5:30 p.m. So within 1 hour of the accident, Harold was found, declared dead, documented, and all paperwork submitted before I even arrived at the hospital? The doctor who signed the certificate was Dr. William Hart, but Harold always said the town doctor was Dr. Quinn. I called Dr. Quinn's clinic. The nurse said Dr. Hart filled in for a few hours that day and left, and no one had seen him since. Then something else. I found an email insurance correspondence sent directly to Daniel. It confirmed that the $350,000 life insurance claim had already been approved, 12 hours after Harold was declared dead. The beneficiary wasn't me. It was Daniel Brooks. I sat completely still, listening to the ticking clock. A terrifying thought crept in. Could my own son be involved? But the mother in me resisted instantly. I know Daniel. I held him when storms scared him as a little boy. I know Ben. When he was 7, he stayed up all night crying because he thought the neighbor's dog that went missing would starve somewhere cold. Those boys, my boys, could they really become men capable of something like this? I didn't want to believe it. But fear doesn't care about what we want. In the corner of the living room sat Harold's old computer. It was still on frozen in sleep mode. Harold kept everything on there. Invoices, maintenance schedules, sometimes even little journal entries. I typed in the password. 6 letters, our first daughter's name. The one we lost so many years ago. The screen lit up. I didn't know what I was searching for, but then I saw a folder at the top. For Eleanor. Harold wasn't a romantic man. He never wrote love letters. He loved me in quieter ways. Fixing the roof before the storm came. Refilling the coffee tin before it went empty, washing my mug every morning before I woke. For him to make a folder just for me meant something was already wrong. Inside were 3 files, a photo, a scanned document with strange wire transfers, and an audio recording. I clicked the recording. Harold's voice played, hoarse, quiet, like he was speaking fast before someone walked in. Eleanor, if you're hearing this, it means I'm not safe. I didn't die in the explosion. They attacked me, then staged the accident. Do not trust the local police. Some of them have been bought, and don't fully trust Daniel or Ben. My heart stopped. His voice continued. I don't have much time. The only person you can trust is Carl Benson. Carl. The name felt like a ghost. Carl was Harold's closest friend years ago, a former police officer. But he was fired after reporting corruption inside the department. He left town. Nobody knew where he went. Harold's final words on the recording were, if one day you have to choose between trusting your sons and trusting the truth, choose the truth. I'm sorry it's come to this. I sat there for a long time. I thought I'd cry, but no. No tears left. Just a coldness filling my chest. That afternoon, I put on Harold's old coat, took the car, and left home. I didn't tell Daniel or Ben. I followed the highway toward the Tennessee River. toward the old gas station where someone once said Carl had been seen. Then, a wooden house deep in the woods, mile marker 14, just like they told me. I knocked. The door opened. A man, gray hair, tired eyes. It was Carl. He didn't look surprised. He just stepped aside and let me in. I handed him the recording. He listened quietly. When Harold said his name, Carl shut his eyes like something inside him cracked. He spoke slowly. Harold came to me 3 weeks before the explosion. He said he had something that Daniel and Ben were afraid of. He told me that if he ever disappeared, I should tell you not to trust the funeral. I stood there, feeling like my soul was being pulled out of my body. In that moment, I knew my life would never go back to what it was. Fake ashes, wrong death certificate, insurance money, my sons. All pieces of one horrible truth. Harold didn't die in an accident. He was forced to disappear. And I, an old woman who thought her life was finally quiet, was the one left to uncover it. I drove back home from Carl's cabin long after dark. The country road was empty, streetlights casting pale yellow circles onto the asphalt like fading memories. The house was silent, too silent, the kind of silence that presses against your ears. The fake urn was still on the kitchen table, sitting there like a quiet witness to everything I no longer understood. I turned on the lights, hung my coat over a chair, and stood in the middle of my own living room, wondering how long I'd been a stranger in my own life. I didn't cry anymore. The grief had changed, sharper, clearer, almost terrifying in how calm it felt. I made tea, but just as I took a small sip, my heart tightened. Outside the window, headlights, a flash of light, then darkness. A car had pulled up, and then vanished. I'd gotten used to people showing up during the funeral, but this felt different. This felt like I was being watched. I turned off all the lights except the hallway lamp. I stood behind the curtains watching. Nobody, but I could feel it. Ever since I read that message, I'm still alive, don't trust anyone. I knew I wasn't just grieving. I was being hunted. The next morning, I did something I never imagined I would do. I searched through every piece of mail in the house. Bills, grocery ads, charity letters, and then one plain brown envelope. No return address, just my name scrawled across the front, Eleanor Brooks. I tore it open. Inside was something small and cold. Harold's wedding ring. I knew it instantly. The tiny scratch on the inside edge, the weight of it. But something was wrong. There was dried mud on it, and blood. Dark, rusty-colored blood stuck in the grooves, and inside the band, next to the engraving H.B. E.B. was something new, a fresh marking, scratched in unevenly, as if done in a hurry. S47. I didn't know what it meant, but I knew who might. I drove straight to Carl's cabin. He opened the door, saw the ring in my hand, and his face changed. We sat at his old wooden table. Carl examined the ring under a magnifying glass. His voice was low when he finally spoke. S47. That's a ranger station code. Smoky Mountain National Park, Station 47. I stared at him. He sighed, like old memories were waking up. Years ago, before you and Harold married. He worked there one summer. He told me about an abandoned cabin near Station 47. Hard to find. No one goes there anymore. Eleanor. If he left you this ring, he wants you to go there. I looked at the ring again. The dried mud, the dried blood, the engraving. Somewhere inside, I could hear Harold's voice. If one day I disappear, don't trust the funeral. I stood up and said only one thing. We're going. The drive to the Smoky Mountains took over 2 hours. The sky was gray. Clouds hung low over the ridges, and cold air seeped straight into my bones. I remember driving this same road years ago when Harold and I were young. We used to camp in these woods. I remembered pine smoke, crackling fire, and Harold telling me stories about doves nesting on cabin roofs. Now the same trees stood like dark sentries. Every turn of the road I felt eyes on us. Carl drove. He didn't speak once. His knuckles were white on the steering wheel. We parked near an old trail. The rest, we had to walk. The ground was wet. My shoes sank into mud. Branches snapped under our feet. After nearly an hour, we saw it. A weather-beaten wooden cabin, half swallowed by trees. Windows broken. Roof sagging under piles of wet leaves. Carl went first. He pushed the door open, hinges screeching like a warning. The smell hit me immediately. Damp wood, burned ash, and something metallic. Blood. Inside was a broken table, a torn map of the forest pinned to the wall, and near the back door, a dark stain on the floorboards. Dried blood, almost black. In the corner, an old handheld camera smashed. Next to it, a dusty memory card. Carl took it, inserted it into his spare camera. The screen flickered. For a few seconds, just darkness. Shaking hands, a low breath. Then, Harold's face appeared. Bruised, blood on his temple, eyes sunken but alive. He looked straight into the lens, straight at me. If anyone finds this, tell Eleanor they're watching her. The screen went black. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just stood there, feeling the world tilt under my feet. Harold was alive, hurt, hiding, and still trying to protect me. We left as the sky darkened. The wind picked up, rattling through the trees. Carl walked ahead of me, but when we reached the car, he froze. He was staring into the side mirror. I followed his gaze. There, half hidden among the trees, a black SUV. No lights, no plates. Waiting. Carl didn't look at me. His voice was barely a whisper. Don't turn around. Get in the car. Now. I got in, my heart hammered against my ribs. As we pulled away, I glanced at the mirror. The SUV's headlights flared to life. It followed. And that's when I realized I was no longer just searching for the truth. The truth was now coming after me. Carl and I left the Smoky Mountains just as the sky turned violet. The black SUV stayed behind us the entire way, silent, patient-like, a predator that knew we were already caught. It disappeared only when we reached the fork between the highway and the road back to town. I couldn't tell if it had gotten what it wanted, or if it simply wanted us to know. We've marked you. When I finally stood in front of my house, I hesitated. The door I had walked through thousands of times suddenly felt like the entrance to a cage, but I still had to go in, because if I acted differently, Daniel and Ben would notice. Inside, everything looked exactly the same lamp, the same pictures on the wall, and in the middle of the dining table, the fake urn. But I was no longer the same woman who placed it there last night. The next morning, Daniel showed up. He stepped out of his brand new truck wearing a calm smile that didn't reach his eyes. He brought pastries from the town bakery, saying he'd stay a few days to take care of me. I thanked him, smiled like a normal mother would, but inside something broke. What I saw in his eyes wasn't grief. It was control. By afternoon, Ben arrived too. He brought nothing but a jacket that smelled faintly of cigarettes. He hugged me longer than usual, but never looked me in the eye. When he passed the dining table, his gaze stopped at the urn. Not with sorrow, not with love, but with worry, as if he was checking whether things were going according to plan. I didn't confront them. I didn't mention the fake ashes, the insurance documents, or the message from Harold. I asked the kind of questions a mother is supposed to ask. Are you sleeping okay? How's work? Does it still hurt this much? They answered with silence, a long, heavy silence. That night, after they left, I walked through the house as if I were walking through a stranger's home. And that's when I saw it. A tiny red light, no bigger than a pinhead, blinking from behind a potted plant. A camera. A hidden camera pointed directly at the dining table, where the urn was, where I sat every evening. My heart thudded painfully. My hands turned cold. I didn't know how long it had been there or who put it there, but I understood one thing. They weren't protecting me. They were watching me. I calmly covered the camera with a cloth and slipped it into my pocket, slowly, carefully, like someone watering a plant. If someone was watching from the other side, I couldn't let them see fear. That evening, Ben returned and said he'd stay the night because you shouldn't be alone, Mom. We had chicken soup and bread for dinner, and then he said something that froze the blood in my veins. You don't have to worry anymore, Mom. Dad's insurance money? It's more than enough for all of us to live comfortably. I put my spoon down. I don't want money, I said quietly. I want your father back. Ben looked away. He didn't answer. But later, I caught him glancing at the urn again. That look, I will never forget it. After he went to sleep, I quietly went to the basement. Harold's old safe was still there. My fingers trembled as I entered the code. Inside, tax papers, property deeds, old medical files, and a new folder. Power of attorney, financial authorization, medical consent, all signed by me. Except the signature wasn't mine. Someone had copied it perfectly, almost perfectly. They didn't know that I always curve the last stroke slightly to the left. This one didn't. I took photos of everything, put them back in place. Before dawn, while Ben was still asleep, I left the house and drove to Carl. I showed him the audio message, the forged documents, and the camera. He studied every piece. Then he said, "Don't go to the police." If Harold was right, they're already involved. I didn't answer. He continued, voice low, "I'll handle the rest. Your only job now is to stay alive until Harold comes back." I didn't know how much I could trust him, but right then, he was all I had. That night, when I returned home, Ben was gone. The house was dark and quiet. I turned on the hallway lamp. My phone buzzed, a message, from the same number as before. "Don't stay in the house tonight." No greeting, no name, just an order. I didn't hesitate. I grabbed my keys, Harold's wedding ring, my wallet, and left. 20 minutes later, as I drove through the dark road leading away from home, boom! A deafening explosion behind me. The sky lit up orange. I slammed the brakes, stepped out. Through the trees, I saw my house. Burning. Flames swallowed the roof, climbing the porch, window glass bursting like screams. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just stood there and whispered inside. Harold saved me. Again. And if he could still warn me, that means he is still alive. Somewhere. And from this moment on, I was no longer just a grieving widow. I was the only living witness to a truth someone was willing to kill to bury. I holed up at a roadside motel, the kind you find off any highway. Flickering neon, threadbare carpet, the smell of bleach fighting with old cigarette smoke. The first night after the fire, I lay on the squeaky spring mattress and listened to tractor-trailers roll by like an endless surf. I'd lost my house, my last safe place. But the worst part wasn't the things I owned turning to ash. The worst part was knowing someone had stood close enough to strike the match, then stepped back to watch the flames eat everything that was mine. If Harold hadn't sent that text, I would have gone up with it. I taped over the peephole without thinking, a new habit born the moment I realized I'd been watched. On the table, I spread the jagged pieces I had, photos of the forged power of attorney, Harold's audio file, the pinhole camera, and his wedding ring carved with S47. Every piece pointed the same way. Someone needed Harold gone, and that same someone wanted me quiet, for good. The next morning, Carl called. His voice was gravelly, clipped, like a man who hadn't slept. He'd found a lead, a truck driver who'd transported Harold the day of the crash. We met in an old parking lot away from traffic cams. The driver showed late, shifty in the way of people who know the bad roads by heart. He wouldn't meet my eyes, just stared at his red clay boots, like his pupils might confess without him. He admitted Daniel's people paid him cash to swap the body, use a homeless John Doe in place of Harold. The paperwork had been prepped in advance. Everything moved faster than felt human. They needed Harold dead on schedule, quick, clean, neat. But somewhere in that brutal script, a window cracked open. Harold bribed the driver back, demanded to get out at a spot with no cameras, and vanished into the trees like a river slipping under winter ice. I went numb while he spoke. Fear made room for something harder. Anger. A stranger can do wrong for debt or cowardice. A son signing his name into the machinery that killed his father is a fracture that never sets. Maybe forgiveness lives somewhere on the map. Not today. Today the list held only 2 items: stay alive and drag the truth into daylight. By late afternoon, the rain came, tapping the window like small hands trying to warn me. At 4:50, the motel phone rang. A flattened voice, neither male nor female, processed to blur the edges, said, "If you want the truth, go to Oakview Motel, room 7. Come alone." Then the line went dead. I sat a while, testing myself to see if fear still lived in me. It did, just trimmed down to a kind I could walk with. I took a burner phone and a small folding knife, the kind I used to cut garden twine. I left a note in the drawer for myself more than anyone else. If I don't come back, remember the text at the funeral was real. Not for someone to find, for me to keep from backing down. Oakview was 10 minutes away, faded sign. No clerk at the desk. I went straight to room 7. The door was ajar. Inside it was dark, smelling like damp and hasty departures. On the bedspread lay one thing, centered and neat, a black USB drive. No note, no sugar-coated trap, just a thumb-sized memory, staring like an eye. I locked the door, drew the curtains, opened my old laptop, the USB mounted. One folder, one video file, named yesterday's date. I hit play. Harold filled the frame, gaunt, jaw bristled, eyes bruised beneath. The light wobbled like a flashlight in a small room. He spoke slowly, spending each word like money he didn't have. "Eleanor, if you're seeing this, it means I didn't make it to the safe place yet. I'm hiding. They're hunting. Don't go back to familiar spots. Don't trust windows where the curtains stay lit too long. If I'm killed, it was Daniel. If I disappear, I'm waiting somewhere safer." He paused, drew a shallow breath. "One more thing. The one you trust might not be standing with you. Not everyone with a badge or a title wants you alive." He lifted his eyes, past the lens, as if talking to what stood behind me. "Don't trust the costume of authority. We've gone beyond a small-town job. The video cut. No goodbye, no music, just black." I sat a long time, listening to rain pound the roof like footsteps. I didn't know who Harold meant by the one you trust. Carl rose first in my mind, and I pushed the thought away like a sin. Without Carl, I wouldn't know about the cabin, the memory card, or S47. But I also remembered Harold's warning, don't trust local police. Prudence was the only blade I had left, sharp enough to cut delusion, not so sharp I'd bleed myself. I pocketed the USB, checked the peephole. Empty hall. I slipped out, crossed the wet lot under the stretched neon glow, and drove straight to meet Carl. I didn't want to hold that thing on me any longer. Anyone who could burn my house wouldn't blink finishing the job. The meet spot was an abandoned lot behind a dead supermarket. Carl was already there, coat collar up, eyes sweeping in a worn habit that used to keep men like him from dying. I handed him the USB and recapped the video. He didn't interrupt, didn't act surprised. He just nodded, weariness flashing through his eyes. Enough to crack a door. We split up. He told me to drive out first. He'd shadow a ways back to spot the tail. The old-school phrasing felt strangely comforting in a day when nothing else did. I took the main road. Rain steamed off the blacktop in a low, masking fog. In the mirror, a low light, then two, then gone, then back again. I couldn't tell what car. I kept the speed steady, no panic, no bravado. At the freeway ramp, I merged left. A black SUV slid into view, neither near nor far, the distance of someone unhurried. I changed lanes. It changed lanes. Right turn. It turned. My chest tightened. Headlights flashed from the opposite lane. One beam slightly off, brightness uneven. I knew that signature, Carl's car. He cut across, sliding between me and the SUV on purpose. I didn't have time to think, just the convergence of two light cones, the long scream of brakes, the heavy crunch of metal like boulders colliding. I jerked my wheel to the shoulder, heart punching my throat. It took seconds, but the sound stretched forever, warped and string snapping. By the time I scrambled out, the black SUV had reversed, spun, and vanished into rain. Carl's car sat skewed against the barrier, airbags blown ghost white. I ran to him, calling his name. He was conscious, eyes open, blood threading from his brow into his collar. He motioned me back, rasping, "Go." I shook my head. He forced it out. "Not now." "It'll be back. Go." A red light glowed somewhere down road like an eye deciding whether to blink. I had no choice. I pressed my palm to the glass in a promise and ran for my car. I drove, heart beat to gas pedal, one rhythm. Whoever they were checking my edges, what makes me panic, what makes me fold. I refused them that gift. I parked behind the motel, slipped in through the back, triple-locked the door, dragged a chair to the knob. I sat on the floor with my back to the wall and stared into the dark, the kind that holds every plot my mind can't yet name. The phone buzzed on the table, blocked number. I let it ring 3 times, then answered. Silence for 2 beats, then the voice I'd chased in every breath for weeks. Thin, frayed, but Harold's. "Eleanor." I closed my eyes. I didn't dare speak loud, afraid any sound would snap the thread holding him to me. He dropped words like they weighed him down. "Don't trust Carl completely." Someone inside law enforcement flipped. They'll erase whatever they have to. Don't go back. Don't answer unknown numbers. Use one mark only if you're safe. The line cut clean as wire. I sat there, the phone heavy as iron. Part of me lunged to reject it, to protect the last clean bond I thought I had. Carl had just thrown his car in front of mine. That's not betrayal. But Harold's warning rang on. Someone in law enforcement turned. Carl is ex-law enforcement. In this season, the word itself is a double-edged knife. One edge for the enemy, the other nicking the hand that holds it. I didn't call Harold back. I didn't call Carl either. I sent a blank text to the burner Harold used, using the old private code from years ago when our secrets were silly. 1 dot, I hear you. 2 dots, I understand. 3 dots, I'm not safe. I sent a period dot. Nothing came back. The night stretched like an empty platform. The rain stopped. but the drip from the eaves kept ticking into a plastic bin outside. Tired, relentless. I lay on my side, eyes open to the dark, listening to my own breath push through ribs. I thought about Daniel and Ben on those fall Sundays, sprawled on the rug, arguing over football while Harold tossed popcorn at their heads. I thought about the thin border between ambition and crime, a chalk line a single bad day can wash away like it was never there. At first light, I circled the county hospital by a back route. I didn't stop, just slowed enough to scan the ER entrance and lot. No Carl's car, no black SUV. A hollow feeling filled in. Everything that mattered had slipped into the unseen part of the map. Back at the motel, I wrote 3 lines on a blank page. Video confirms Harold is alive. The body swap was real. Someone in law enforcement is bought. Trust no one. Don't stay put. I tucked the paper behind our yellowed wedding photo. I was setting a new discipline for myself. The discipline of walking a booby-trapped forest. Step slow. Avoid dry leaves. Read the wind. Listen to silence. The phone buzzed again. A new text. No name. 4 words, dry as bone. This time my pulse didn't spike. It flattened. Lake calm. Don't go back there. I replied with a single dot. No answer. I packed. Left again without looking over my shoulder. At the threshold, I realized I'd changed. I wasn't the widow who shook opening a sham urn. I was a woman hunting for her husband with empty hands and a single compass point: truth. If I had to, I'd dig with those hands until I hit the part of us money, fire, and forged signatures could never take. I shut the door. The key clicked once. In the hallway, my shadow stretched long and thin, like a cord tying 2 ends of a life together. On one end, the woman who buried her husband. On the other, the woman who refuses to believe in that burial. In between, there was only me and a USB that had just lit another corner of the dark. For an entire week after Carl disappeared, I never slept in the same place twice. My house had already burned to the ground. The police called it an electrical fire, closed the file, and walked away as if nothing strange had happened. I stayed in a rundown motel off the highway, thin walls, flickering lights, the kind where you can hear every 18-wheeler rumble past like thunder. I stopped using my old phone. I bought 5 cheap burner phones, switched SIM cards after each call, wrote down locations on scraps of paper, then burned them in the bathroom sink. I didn't fully trust Carl anymore. He was the only person helping me, but Harold's warning kept replaying. Don't trust Carl. Someone in law enforcement has already turned. Every night before I locked the door, I pushed a chair up against it. I slept with the lights on. Any small noise, footsteps in the hallway, a door shutting somewhere, jerked me awake with my heart pounding. 2 things haunted me more than sleep. Daniel's cold stare at the funeral, and Harold's voice in that second USB. If I'm dead, it's Daniel. If I'm missing, I'm waiting for you somewhere. I thought I had already learned what fear was, but that night, I realized I hadn't. It was close to midnight when someone knocked on my door. 3 soft knocks, as if the person on the other side wasn't sure they should. My breath stopped in my throat. No one knew I was here. I slipped off the bed and grabbed the table lamp like a weapon. "Who is it?" I asked. No reply. Then the quiet voice, nearly a whisper, slipped through the crack in the door. "Delivery." I unlocked only the chain, opened the door 2 inches. A teenage delivery boy stood there, wearing a pizza jacket from a town 20 miles away. In his hands was a small cardboard box. No receipt, no name, just 2 words written in black ink. 4E. I took the box. The boy walked away without a word. Only after I closed the door did I realize I never ordered any pizza. Inside was no food, just 2 things. A basic prepaid phone, power already on. A folded piece of paper. I unfolded it. Press 1. 2 a.m. I looked at the clock. 1:25 a.m. I sat on the bed. The phone in my palm felt like a burning coal. I don't know why, but somewhere deep in me, I still believed Harold was alive and that he wanted me to answer this call. When the clock hit 2 a.m., I pressed 1. Static. Then breathing, shallow, weak, but human. A rusted, cracked voice. Eleanor, is that you? I didn't answer. I couldn't. My throat closed and tears filled my eyes just hearing my own name. Harold spoke again, halting, breathless. Don't try to find me. Do you understand? I'm not anywhere near home. They're using you to lure me out. I pressed the phone harder to my ear. Don't trust anyone. Not Carl, not the local police. Daniel and Ben, they're not the boys we raised anymore. They'll do anything to get the insurance money. I whispered, broken. Where are you? Tell me and I'll dash the line cut out. Silence. Cold and endless. The next morning, as if guided by instinct more than logic, I drove to the bank Harold's bank. The manager, who'd known us for 20 years, looked at me like I was made of glass about to crack. When I asked for the insurance transaction records, she hesitated. I said quietly, if I don't do this now, I'll lose more than money. She printed the files. There it was, plain as daylight. $350,000 in life insurance, paid out 2 days after Harold's death. Not to me, to Daniel. I called Ben, not to ask, but to listen. He dodged every question, saying, everything's handled legally. Mom, please rest. Daniel's taking care of everything. That's when I knew. That evening, I drove to Daniel's real estate office. I still remembered the passcode he once proudly showed me his first private office. Inside, locked in a steel cabinet, I found it. A full transfer of asset agreement, giving Daniel full control of all of Harold's properties and funds. Signed with my name. My signature perfectly forged. Except for one detail Daniel didn't know. I always pull the last stroke of my name slightly left. This one didn't. Beside it were emails. We need cremation earlier than planned. Death certificate must be finalized immediately. Don't worry about her. I'll make sure Mom signs. Standing there in the dark office, surrounded by documents with my name, but not my hand, one truth crashed over me. My husband was never meant to die by accident. My sons planned it, and I was next. Just then, my burner phone buzzed. A message, short, rushed. I'm at an old farm near the Tennessee-Kentucky woods. Don't come alone, but don't be late. No name, but I knew who it was. Harold. My hands didn't shake from fear. It was something colder, sharper, because all the pieces had finally fallen into place. Harold was alive. Someone wanted him dead. Now they wanted me gone, too. I grabbed my keys. Outside, the night was black as ink. For the first time since it all began, I wasn't just searching for the truth anymore. I was going to save a life. I left town before sunrise. The road out of Tennessee curved through dark, frozen hills. Quiet, lonely, and heavy with the kind of silence that makes you hear your own heartbeat. I was driving Harold's old green Ford truck, the one he'd kept running for almost 40 years. Of everything I'd lost, my home, my peace, my certainty, this truck was the only thing that still felt like us, like a piece of my life that hadn't been stolen yet. I didn't tell a soul where I was going. Not the police, not my sons, not the church, not friends or neighbors. Because once evil finds its way into your own bloodline, into the hands of the children you raised, anyone who stands in between can be the next body in the ground. Harold's last message was all I had. Old farm, near the Tennessee-Kentucky border. Don't come alone. Don't be too late. No address, no map, just a memory. But I knew what he meant. Last year, before everything collapsed, Harold mentioned an abandoned farm deep in the northern woods. The owners had gone bankrupt and disappeared, leaving behind a weather-beaten cabin, an empty horse barn, and a sheet metal storage shed rusting under years of rain. So I turned off the main road and followed a narrow dirt path. Tires crunched over frost and stones. The trees closed in on both sides, thick, dark, silent, like they were holding their breath. It took 40 minutes before I saw it, a shape in the fog. The farm. A small wooden house sat in the middle of a frost-covered field. The roof was dark with moss, the windows were shut tight. But from one crack beneath the door I saw it, a faint yellow glow. Someone was inside. My heart slammed against my ribs. This could be a trap, or it could be him. I stepped out of the truck, cold grass soaked into my shoes. The air smelled of wet earth and pine. For a moment, a memory hit me so sharply it hurt. Harold coming home before dawn, smelling of rain and frozen metal, holding 2 cups of coffee while I sat waiting in my robe. But that kind of peace belonged to a life that no longer existed. I walked to the door, knocked 3 times, silence. I raised my hand to knock again. My voice cracked, not from fear, but from all the words I hadn't said in weeks. He guided me inside. The cabin was dim, lit by a single lamp on a table cluttered with maps, empty food cans, scribbled notes, and a portable radio he used to listen to weather updates. He handed me a steaming mug, my old white ceramic cup from a county fair years ago. His hands were shaking. We sat. For a long time, neither of us spoke. Then Harold did. "The explosion at the workshop wasn't an accident," he said. His voice was calm, too calm, like a man who's rehearsed his own death 100 times. "Someone came the night before. Rigged the place. When I flipped the power switch, everything went up." My stomach twisted. He kept talking. "Daniel came to me a month earlier." Harold said quietly. "He said he wanted to expand the business insurance in case something happened to me. Said it was for the family." His hands clenched. "But the paperwork listed him and Ben as the only beneficiaries. Not you." My throat tightened. I refused. Harold said, "Then this happened." I asked him how he survived. "I didn't." He said softly, "Not in their eyes." He told me they knocked him unconscious, staged the scene, switched his body with a homeless man who had no papers, and rushed the process so fast there was no chance for an autopsy or goodbye. Someone in law enforcement helped. Someone signed off the paperwork so fast that it was like Harold was never a person, just a transaction. A truck driver helped him escape. Harold paid him with everything he had saved. Then he vanished. He stayed gone to protect me. Because if I showed up without proof, Harold said, tears in his voice though not in his eyes, Daniel and Ben would have taken you next. I had to gather evidence first. Insurance records, transfers, recordings. He took out a small metal lockbox from under the table. Inside, a USB drive, printed insurance documents, bank transfers showing Daniel withdrew Harold's insurance payout. A recorded conversation, Daniel's voice, cold and steady, planning the accident. Harold looked at me. "Eleanor, if you found me, that means they've started watching you." I nodded. "The house burned down. Carl is missing. Daniel keeps trying to get me to sign over everything." Harold's face went pale. "Then we don't have much time," he whispered. "We can't just run anymore. We have to end this." I looked at him, truly looked. This was not just about survival anymore. This was about truth. About two sons who had traded their souls for money. Harold's voice softened. "You didn't just save me tonight," he said. "You might be saving what's left of them, if there's anything left to save." A quiet fell between us. Not peace, not safety, but understanding. Outside, snow began to fall, slow, silent, like the morning of his funeral. But this time, I wasn't staring at a coffin full of lies. This time, I was staring at the truth. And truth does not die. I remember the morning we set the trap. Not with guns, not with a perfect speech, not like the movies. Just me. A woman who had lost her husband, her home, her trust in her own blood. Sitting at a wooden table in a small cabin, deep in the woods, writing a short letter to my son. "Daniel, I need you to come sign the new documents. Your father left another will. You're the main beneficiary. No accusations, no blame. Just a mother asking her son to come home." Except it was bait. Harold checked the hidden microphone under the table one last time. Another camera was tucked behind a framed picture on the wall. On the laptop was a USB loaded with the recordings, documents, and videos, everything that could end Daniel's life the moment he admitted the truth. He turned to me. His voice was low, trembling, not from fear, but from the weight of what was about to happen. "Are you sure you can handle this? You'll have to listen to him. Say everything." I didn't flinch. "If we stay silent, the next body won't just be yours." We didn't use the cabin for the meeting. Too isolated, too suspicious. Instead, we borrowed a small house about 6 miles away, belonging to a widow Harold had grown up with. She didn't ask why. She just handed over the keys and said quietly, "Keep the lights on. Darkness out here has a way of swallowing people whole." That afternoon, Daniel arrived. I heard his engine before I saw him. A sleek black SUV, worth more than Harold ever made in a year at the machine shop, pulled into the dirt driveway. Timothy, the widow's brother-in-law chopping wood outside, stopped mid-swing and watched silently. Daniel walked in wearing a gray overcoat, face calm and cold. He didn't hug me. He just said, "You said there's another will?" I nodded, my chest tight, but my voice steady. "Your father wanted everything to be clear before he passed. I'm not well. I don't want arguments later." I pushed the stack of fake documents toward him. Daniel flipped through the pages. His hand, once small and curled around my thumb when he was a baby, now rested on legal contracts like he was closing a business deal. There was a long silence. Then he smirked, soft, impatient. "You still don't get it, do you, Mom?" I didn't answer. He leaned back in his chair, voice low, no hesitation, no shame. "You think Dad died in some tragic accident. You think people just cry and move on?" A hollow laugh. "Dad was weak. He wouldn't change. I did what I had to do to save this family." I stared at him. "You killed your father to save us?" He didn't deny it. He didn't even blink. "I didn't kill him. I just sped things up. If I didn't do it, we'd lose everything. The house, the business. Ben would be arrested for financial fraud. Dad stood in the way." My blood ran cold, not from fear, but from the realization that this wasn't desperation. It was logic. In his mind, it made sense. Then he said it, clearly, slowly. "I hired someone to stage the explosion. It wasn't supposed to kill him, just remove him from the equation." And at that exact moment, the back door creaked open. Harold stepped inside. No dramatic music, no spotlight, no heroic entrance, just a gaunt, exhausted man in a worn jacket. The same man Daniel had eulogized and burned in a fake urn. My son froze, his skin turned white, eyes wide, breath gone. Harold spoke softly. "Son, I'm alive." Silence. Daniel stepped back, hand trembling. Then, exactly what I feared most, he reached into his coat and pulled out a gun. "You don't understand," he shouted. "I never meant for anyone to die. But now it's too late." Harold didn't move, didn't beg. He opened both hands slowly. "No, son. Nothing is too late, unless you pull that trigger." But Daniel wasn't listening anymore. He raised the gun, pointed it at Harold's chest. I thought I was about to watch the man I love die for the second time, this time for real. Then, sirens, shouting, footsteps. The front door burst open. Men and women in FBI jackets flooded the room, weapons drawn. "Daniel Brooks, drop the gun. You are under arrest for attempted murder, insurance fraud, and conspiracy to commit homicide." Daniel's hand went limp. The gun fell to the floor. He didn't cry. He just looked at me. Not with fear, but with betrayal, as if he were the victim and I was the one who pushed him toward the flames. They took him away in handcuffs. Ben wasn't there that night, but later that same evening, he walked into the Cumberland County Sheriff's Office and turned himself in. I don't remember how long I stood there after the FBI cars disappeared into the fog. Harold gently placed his shaking hand on my shoulder. "Eleanor, it's over." But it wasn't. Justice had come, but peace was still a long way off. I looked out into the dark trees and whispered, to Harold, maybe to God, "Justice doesn't bring peace, but at least it opens the door for the truth to walk in." After the day Daniel was handcuffed and taken out of that rented house, everything went eerily quiet. No more police sirens. No more cars idling outside my window at night. No more neighbors staring as I walked by. No more unknown numbers sending threats in the dark. But the silence wasn't peace. It felt like the frozen surface of a winter lake, still and pale on the outside, hiding ice-cold water and darkness underneath. Harold was officially declared alive. The local papers called him the man who returned from the dead. People in Cedar Creek whispered, some with pity, others with fear. But we didn't stay. A week after Daniel and Ben were arrested, Harold turned to me and said quietly, "I don't want to die a second time under everyone's stares." The next morning before dawn, we packed what little we had left and left town. We rented a small cabin near Crossville Lake, miles away from everyone. Harold used to camp there when he was young. The cabin was simple, dark pine walls, a small wood stove, windows facing still water. No internet, no close neighbors. Just the early morning birds and wind moving through the pines. For most people, it would feel lonely. For us, it felt like breathing again, but Harold's body was failing. Every morning I heard him coughing into the bathroom sink, breath rattling like stones in his chest. The doctor said his lungs were damaged, from smoke, from chemicals, from running and hiding too long. They suggested the hospital. Harold shook his head. I didn't survive all this just to die surrounded by bleach and hospital lights. So I cared for him at home, lighting the fireplace, making peppermint tea, opening the curtains every morning so sunlight touched his face. Some nights he'd wake up gasping, calling my name like a frightened child. I'd take his hand and whisper, "I'm here." It's just me, no one else. Despite the pain, something changed in him. The closer he got to the end, the more he wanted his life to mean something. One cold February morning, he sat in his wooden chair, eyes on the lake, and said, "Eleanor, surviving isn't enough. Everything we went through, there has to be a purpose." That's when he told me his idea. Not a foundation with marble floors and shiny plaques, just a small name. The Brooks Foundation. A place, no matter how small, that would help people like us. Older folks whose children stole their houses and left them with nothing. Parents forced to sign away their assets by threats and manipulation. People betrayed by their own blood, but too ashamed to speak. It wasn't much, just a post office box, a phone line, and a table in that lakeside cabin. I didn't think anyone would write, but 3 weeks later the first letter came, from a woman named Grace in Missouri. Her husband had sold everything she owned and left her in a nursing home. Then came 2 more, from Ohio and Kentucky, all with the same sentence. I thought I was the only one whose family could do that to me. Harold read every letter. His hands trembled, but his eyes looked different. There was a spark there, small, fragile, but alive. He started keeping a journal. Every morning, after tea and medication, he'd sit at the desk and write, longhand. Some days he wrote a full page, some days only a few words before the coughing took over. One evening in late March, with the sun spilling gold over the lake, he handed me a page, fresh ink, his handwriting. If I really leave this world, at least you taught me one last thing. That trust can die, but love doesn't. I didn't cry. I just put my hand over his. He looked at me, smiled, tired, peaceful. If I don't wake up tomorrow, remember that. Don't let our story end with pain. And the next morning, he didn't wake up. No gasping, no struggle, just Harold lying still, sunlight touching his silver hair, face calm like a man who had finally reached home after a very long road. I sat beside him for a long time. I memorized every line on his face, every callus on his hand, the last remaining marks of a life spent working, loving, suffering, and fighting back. That afternoon, I dressed him in the blue sweater I knitted in our first year of marriage. I placed his old pocket watch, the one that survived the explosion, beside his hand. Later, I sat alone by the lake. In my lap was a letter Harold had written weeks earlier. He asked for one thing. Don't bury me in that town. Scatter my ashes here, where love wasn't used against us. So I burned the letter, let the ashes drift over the lake, and whispered, "This time, you're finally free." The weeks that followed moved slowly. I kept the foundation going. I answered letters, made calls, connected desperate people to lawyers who believed them. Shared pain became something we could build from. Every Sunday, I picked wildflowers and walked to the edge of the lake where Harold now rested. I told him everything. About the women who escaped after their children took their homes. About the young man who ran from an abusive father. About the old man in a nursing home who wrote, "Your story gave me my dignity back." I never knew if he could hear, but when the wind moved across the lake and the water rippled, I felt he did. I don't think of myself as a survivor anymore. I am just a woman who lost almost everything, but chose to keep living anyway. Because grief might take your house, might take your children, might carve your heart out, but truth is the only thing that keeps your soul from disappearing completely. After Harold left this world quietly, the cabin by Crossville Lake stayed exactly the way it was the day before he closed his eyes. His old flannel jacket was still draped over the chair where he used to sit and watch the sunrise. The journal he'd been writing in lay open pen, resting across the page, like he had just stepped outside for a moment and would come back any second. But I knew this time he wouldn't. I didn't collapse the way I did after the first time I thought he died in that workshop explosion. There were no false ashes, no church organ echoing through cold wooden walls, no crowd dressed in black, just me, a still lake, and a truth that sat quietly inside my chest. This loss hurts, but it is not meaningless. Maybe because this time his death wasn't a betrayal. This time, it was peace. I buried Harold's ashes at the foot of the tallest pine tree behind the cabin. He once told me, if there's another life after this, I want to come back as a pine tree, roots deep in cold earth, face turned toward the sky. I don't know if that's true, but as I covered the last handful of soil, the wind swept across the branches and the pine needles whispered like someone saying, "It's okay, Elle. You did well." My shit. Shoe did. I kept the Brooks Foundation going, not because Harold was still here, but because the part of him that loved the truth still is. I placed a small wooden table on the front porch, hammered a sign into the railing. If you're afraid inside your own home, knock here. At first, only a few letters came. Then, like water seeping through stone, word began to spread. Women whose children emptied their savings accounts. Elderly men forced to sign away their homes when they were too weak to argue. People betrayed by the very blood they once trusted. They didn't come to me because I was stronger than them. They came because I was living proof that being betrayed by your own family doesn't mean your life is over. 1 year after Harold passed, I received an email from a podcast called Southern Voices. They wanted me to tell my story. From the fake funeral and the message, "I'm alive, don't trust anyone," to the night Harold stepped out of the shadows and stood in front of our son. I hesitated. I spent a lifetime being quiet, keeping secrets, swallowing pain. Now they were asking me to speak it aloud, to strangers who might not believe, might not understand. But then I remembered what Harold wrote. If the truth is never spoken, it doesn't die. It rots inside the person who keeps it. So I said yes. In the recording studio, the host only said, "You don't have to make it sound pretty. Just make it real." And I did. I didn't decorate anything. I didn't dramatize. I spoke like I was speaking to Harold, soft, steady, and with a pain that never raised its voice. When I got to the part about the funeral and the message on my phone, "I'm alive, don't trust anyone," the sound engineer behind the glass froze. When I described the moment my son pointed a gun at his own father, something metallic hit the floor. It was someone dropping their pen. And when I talked about Harold's last night by the lake, I heard someone quietly crying in the corner. The episode aired 2 weeks later. I expected nothing, maybe a few hundred listeners, but by the next morning, my inbox was full. My phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Not with sympathy, not with praise, but with words like, "I thought I was just a burden to my daughter. Because of you, I told my husband I won't let him control all the money anymore. You don't know me, but you saved my life." Then came a handwritten letter from Canada, the handwriting shaky. "If you survived your own family, maybe I can too." My hands trembled as I held the letter, not with fear this time, with hope. That afternoon, I opened Harold's old leather journal, the one he wrote in during his final months. On the last page, he had written a sentence he never got to read to me. "If I disappear, the truth will still be told." But I didn't disappear. I lived to tell it. I rested my hand over his handwriting for a long time. Outside, the sun was sinking. The lake turned gold beneath the sky, like someone gently pouring light over water. I carried the journal to the porch, set it beside a small burning candle. Not to mourn, but to remind myself, I am still here. To live, to tell it. Not just for Harold anymore, but for everyone who ever thought they were alone. So if you're listening to this, if somewhere in your chest something aches because of this story, then let me say this. You are not weak for being hurt by the people who were supposed to love you. You are human, and you are stronger than you think if you choose truth, even when the truth costs you everything. If any part of this story stayed with you, write down what you survived, because sometimes telling it is how we keep living. Tell me in the comments, Where are you listening from? Have you ever had to choose truth even when it meant losing someone you love? If you want more stories like this, hit like, subscribe, or share this story with someone who needs to hear it. Because sometimes, the only thing that keeps someone alive is a voice saying, I understand. You're not alone. Why?